Ready to escape into a world of enchanting pixels? What is up, my peeps? And today we are going to be reading Thomas and Friends, Calling All Engines, celebrating 60 years, based on the Railway series by the Reverend W. Audrey. A new airport is being built on Sodor, but the steam engines and diesels are arguing instead of working. When a storm damages the island, it looks like the opening of the airport will have to be cancelled. Can Thomas persuade the steam engines and diesels to work together to fix everything in time? In the summertime, the engines were kept busy collecting lots of visitors from the docks. One day, the Fat Controller told the engines an airport was being built on Sodor. It will bring even more visitors, so the island must be perfect, he said. Thomas and Percy talked about the airport as they moved wagons. Percy couldn't wait to see the airplanes. But then Airy and Bert arrived. "Stinky steamies," Airy said rudely. Thomas thought the diesels were oily and mean. How are steam engines and diesels different? Steam engines, like Thomas, run on coal. Diesel engines run on diesel fuel. Steam engines make steam. Diesels don't make steam, but sometimes they make black smoke like poor Salty. Diesels have horns which they honk. Steam engines have whistles which they loudly peep. So steamies run on coal, whistle, and make steam. Diesels run on diesel fuel, have horns, and don't make steam. They really are very different. Bert and Airy bragged to Thomas about an important job they had to do. Thomas decided to play a trick on them. He bumped their trucks so wood fell all over the tracks. "Oops," said Thomas meanly. "Now you'll be late for your important job," and he smugly chuffed away. Later on, when Thomas met Percy in the yard, they laughed about Thomas's trick. They didn't notice that Diesel was behind them. "You won't want to stop me from doing the important job," Diesel said, but Thomas decided to trick him, too. How can Thomas trick Diesel? Oh, geez. Diesel needs building supplies for the important job. Thomas has trucks of wood, bananas, and bricks. He'll trick Diesel by giving him the wrong one. Which truck would be wrong for a building site? Is it the brick truck? No, you can build walls with bricks, so that could be useful. How about the timber truck? No, you can build roofs out of wood, so that truck could also be useful. Can you build anything with bananas? No. So Thomas will trick Diesel by giving him the banana truck. Thomas and Percy had to fetch steel girders from the smelter's yard. But when they saw Diesel 10 and his powerful claw, they were scared and left without them. That evening, Thomas was shocked to see that Tidmouth sheds had been knocked down. The Diesel's special job had been to build new ones as a surprise for the steam engines. "Silly tricks made us too late to rebuild them," said Diesel. "And we couldn't build anything with bananas," said the Fat Controller crossly. The steam engines slept in other sheds that night. Thomas stayed with Emily. He felt guilty as he knew his tricks had caused all the trouble. My bad, wrong page. That night there was a fierce storm. Strong gusts of wind ripped off roofs of buildings and blew over trees. The engines were very frightened. A few hours later, some cables on the suspension bridge snapped. Suddenly, the heavy bridge crashed down into the valley below. The next morning, Thomas saw the mast. "Bust my buffers," he cried, and hurried to Tidmouth to meet the other engines. "Unless we clear the storm damage, we can't open the airport on time," the Fat Controller said sadly. All the engines wanted to help. Which engines should do which job? Henry and Edward have brick and timber trucks. Harvey has a crane arm, and Thomas has his carriages, Annie and Clarabelle. Trees have fallen over the tracks. Can Harvey clear them? Yes, he can use his strong crane arm to move the trees. Bricks are needed at the airport. Can Thomas help? No, he only has passenger carriages. Can Henry help? Yes, he can take his brick trucks. Workmen need to go and repair the suspension bridge. Who can take them? Thomas can take them in his passenger carriages. The Fat Controller told Thomas to take a beam to the suspension bridge. It's heavy, so you may need help with it, he added. A Diesel wouldn't need any help, said Diesel slyly. I don't need any help either. I can do it on my... I don't need any help either. I can do it on my own, Thomas said proudly. But the beam was long and heavy. Thomas pushed it slowly along the track. He was going to ask Harry and Bert for help, but they laughed at him, so he slowly went on by himself. When Thomas got to the bridge, he wanted to rest, but first he had to lift the beam into place. Slowly, he lifted it into the air. Steam engines are better than diesels, he bragged, which made Diesel cross. Later, when Thomas was delivering paint, he didn't see Diesel behind him. We'll see who's best, Diesel said, as he shoved Thomas's wagon. Splish, splash, splosh. Colorful paint splashed all over Thomas. Diesel laughed loudly as he rolled away. Before long, all the Diesels and Steamies were fighting. They got so dirty, soon they all needed to be cleaned at the washdown. The engines had been too busy arguing to do any of the repairs. No visitors will want to come here, said the Fat Controller crossly. The engines were ashamed. That night, the engines dreamt about what could happen if there were no visitors. Gordon dreamt he was used as a climbing frame. Thomas dreamt about Lady and Rusty, a Diesel and a Steamy, who worked well together. This gave him an idea, but he needed Mavis's help. He decided to find her in the morning. How can Thomas find Mavis? Thomas knows that Mavis works at the quarry, so he will look for her there. He will also listen for a horn which goes honk. At the quarry, Thomas hears a whistle. Peep! Was it Mavis? No, it was Percy. Mavis is a Diesel, so she has a horn instead of a whistle. Perhaps she is at the docks. Honk! Was that Mavis's horn? Well, it was a horn, but it wasn't Mavis. It was Salty saying hello to Emily. Maybe Mavis is having a clean at the washdown. Honk! Was that Mavis's horn? Yes, it was. Thomas had found her. Thomas knew that Mavis was a kind Diesel who would help him. Please bring the Diesels to a meeting in the morning, he said. Mavis agreed. She knew something had to be done. But Thomas was a little late for the meeting. The Diesels and steam engines were about to start arguing again when he arrived. We have to work together, he said. If the airport doesn't open, we won't have any passengers or freight, so we won't be useful. The engines agreed that they should forget their quarrels and work together. The Fat Controller was delighted. Okay, that is the right page. Which steam engine and diesel engine should work together on each job? All the engines are good at different things. Thomas chooses which diesel engine and steam engine should work together on each job. A small steamy is needed to help Mavis collect paint from the yard. Can Gordon help? No, he's too big. Can Percy help? Yes, he's small, so he can help Mavis. Toby needs a diesel to help take the workmen to the airport. Can Bert help? No, he doesn't take passengers. But Daisy does, so she can help instead. Gordon needs a diesel to help him take a heavy goods train over Gordon's Hill. Can Airy help? Yes, he is strong, so he can help Gordon get over the hill. With all of the engines working together, the repairs were soon done. The engines were excited to hear that the first airplane was on its way. But then disaster struck. As Thomas moved the last trucks, they hit a faulty buffer. They crashed across the tracks and bashed into a water tower. The water tower fell over, making a huge crack in the runway. It had to be repaired or the airplane wouldn't be able to land. Workmen cleared the runway, but they needed George the steamroller to flatten it, and Harvey needed help clearing the falling trucks off the track. Tracks. Not track. Thomas offered to fetch George and get more help. He was coupled to a flatbed truck, and as soon as Harvey had cleared a track, he set off. Thomas went to find Diesel 10. He was still a bit scared of him, but he knew Diesel 10 could help Harvey clear all the rubble off the tracks at the airport. Thomas timidly asked Diesel 10 for help. "All right," Diesel 10 replied immediately. "Let's go." Thomas then realized that Diesel 10 wasn't scary after all. Thomas and Diesel 10 fetched George and hurried to the airport. The other engines were very surprised to see them together. "Good work, George," said the workman. As he flattened the runway, it was soon ready for the airplane to land. All the diesels and steam engines helped clear the tracks. "Working with diesels was fun," said Thomas. You steamies weren't too bad either," laughed Diesel 10. At last, the airplane landed at the airport. The engines all honked their horns and happily blew their whistles. That evening, the steam engines had a nice surprise. "We have new sheds," Thomas said happily. "Tidmouth sheds are bigger now, so Emily can live there too," said the Fat Controller. Emily was thrilled. "I'm glad we're friends with the Diesels now," said Percy. "Yes, it's good to know that, like us, they just want to be really useful engines," replied Thomas happily. And from then on, the Diesels and the steam engines were all happy to work together. The end. Alright, so don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Talk to y'all later.